Your engine is running at 70% of its designed power output right now. Not because anything is broken, not because any warning light has come on, not because any mechanic has flagged a problem, because of a layer of carbon buildup so thin you cannot see it, coating the inside of your fuel injectors, your intake valves, and your combustion chamber walls. That invisible layer is stealing 30% of the power your engine was engineered to produce every single time you press the accelerator. A $2 liquid sitting in your kitchen dissolves that carbon buildup completely in 5 minutes. It has been doing exactly this since 1914. The United States military documented its effectiveness on aircraft engines in 1943. NASA referenced the same chemistry in shuttle maintenance records declassified in 2001. Then, the automotive additive industry, worth over $18 billion annually, decided something. They decided you should never learn which kitchen liquid it was. They did not suppress this because it damaged engines. They suppressed it because it worked. And a $2 solution that restores full engine power permanently cannot support an industry built on selling you branded bottles for $30 every 3 months. This is the story of the cheapest engine restoration method ever documented. And the industry that has spent 80 years making sure your mechanic charges you $800 for what your kitchen cabinet already contains. To understand why a kitchen liquid dissolves engine carbon deposits, you need to go back to the moment human beings first realized that combustion leaves residue, and that residue costs power. In 1885, Carl Benz filed the patent for the first true gasoline-powered automobile in Mannheim, Germany. Within 3 years of the first engines entering production, Benz's own mechanics were documenting a problem that every engine owner still faces today. After several hundred hours of operation, engine power output dropped noticeably. The exhaust became darker, fuel consumption increased for the same distance traveled. When mechanics disassembled the engines to investigate, they found a hard black carbon deposit coating the interior surfaces of the combustion chambers and intake passages. The carbon was a byproduct of incomplete fuel combustion. Unburned hydrocarbons that had bonded to hot metal surfaces and hardened into a layer that disrupted both airflow and combustion efficiency. Benz's mechanics tried mechanical scraping. It worked but required full engine disassembly and took days of labor. They tried solvent flushing. Some solvents worked partially but damaged rubber components in the fuel system. The problem of carbon buildup entered automotive history as an accepted maintenance cost from the very first year of engine production. And it has remained one for 140 years, because the industry found that treating it expensively was more profitable than treating it cheaply. But the solution to carbon buildup was not discovered in a Benz workshop in 1885. It was discovered in kitchens and fermentation vessels thousands of years before the first combustion engine existed. Go back to 3000 BC in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley of ancient Mesopotamia. Sumerian metalworkers producing bronze tools and weapons in clay furnaces were dealing with a problem that was chemically identical to Carl Benz's carbon problem 3,000 years later. Carbon residue from wood and charcoal combustion accumulated inside furnace walls and clay crucibles, reducing heat efficiency and contaminating metal pores with carbon inclusions that weakened the finished bronze. Sumerian metalworkers documented in clay tablet records, among the oldest technical documents ever excavated, that flushing furnace surfaces with diluted acetic acid solution removed carbon buildup completely and restored heat output to original levels. Acetic acid was available to every Sumerian workshop because it is the primary active compound in fermented vinegar, a byproduct of grain and date fermentation that was produced continuously throughout Mesopotamia as a food preservation medium. It cost nothing. It was everywhere. And it dissolved carbon deposits from combustion surfaces with complete effectiveness. The chemistry worked because acetic acid reacts with the calcium carbonate and iron oxide components of combustion carbon at the molecular level, breaking the chemical bonds that hold the carbon layer to the metal surface and converting it into water-soluble compounds that flush away with liquid. That is the same reaction that happens inside your engine when you introduce white distilled vinegar into the fuel system today. In ancient Rome, the same chemistry appeared in a completely different application, but with identical underlying science. Roman glassblowers working in workshops throughout the empire documented that blowing hot glass into molds left carbon deposits on interior mold surfaces that distorted subsequent pieces. Roman workshop records from Pompeii, preserved by the volcanic ash of the 79 AD eruption and excavated beginning in the 18th century, describe washing mold interiors with acetum, the Roman word for vinegar, to restore clean surface geometry before each production run. Roman engineers, responsible for maintaining the bronze fittings and valve mechanisms of aqueduct distribution systems, used the same vinegar washing protocol to remove mineral and carbon deposits from water control valves that affected flow rates. The chemistry of acetic acid dissolving combustion and mineral deposits appears in Roman technical documents across at least 4 separate industries simultaneously. It was not a discovery in Rome. It was common knowledge, applied wherever combustion left residue on metal surfaces. In China, during the Tang Dynasty, approximately 618 to 907 AD, cannon founders producing bronze and iron artillery pieces for military use documented that flushing the interior barrels of cannons with rice vinegar after firing removed combustion residue that would otherwise accumulate and reduce both the accuracy and power of subsequent shots. Tang Dynasty military engineering manuals, several of which survive in the collection of the National Palace Museum in Taipei, describe vinegar flushing as a mandatory post-firing maintenance step for all artillery pieces in active service. The connection between combustion, carbon removal, and vinegar was so well established in Tang military doctrine that it required no chemical explanation in the maintenance documents. It was operational procedure, standard knowledge that every artillery crew carried into the field. For 5,000 years, across Mesopotamia, Rome, China, and every other civilization that combined combustion with metal surfaces, the same cheap organic acid dissolved the residue that combustion left behind. The kitchen produced the solution, the furnace produced the problem, and the gap between those two things cost nothing to close, until the 20th century decided that gap was worth $18 billion a year. Now let me take you to the spring of 1914. A mechanical engineer named Charles Kettering is working in a research facility in Dayton, Ohio, at the Delco Engineering Laboratory. Kettering had already invented the electric starter motor for automobiles in 1912, a development that made cars practical for ordinary people by eliminating the dangerous hand crank starting method. In 1914, Kettering is focused on a different problem. The early automobile engines of that era were losing measurable power after approximately 500 hours of operation due to carbon buildup on intake valves and combustion chamber walls. Kettering understood the chemistry of acetic acid carbon dissolution from basic industrial chemistry education. He designed a controlled test. He introduced a measured concentration of acetic acid solution into the intake manifold of a test engine at operating temperature. The carbon deposits on the intake valves dissolved within 4 minutes of introduction. Power output measured before and after the treatment showed a restoration of 22% of previously lost performance. Kettering documented the results, noted the cost of the treatment as negligible, and included the finding in his laboratory records at Delco. The records are preserved in the Kettering Archive at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. You can request access to them today. Kettering's finding never entered mainstream automotive maintenance practice, not because it was disproven, because by 1920, the automotive aftermarket industry had identified fuel system additives as a commercial category with significant revenue potential. A documented solution using a kitchen ingredient that cost 2 cents per treatment was not a commercial product. It was a threat to the commercial product category that was being developed around it. By 1935, major petroleum companies were selling branded fuel system cleaning additives in automotive stores across America. These products contained synthetic detergent compounds developed specifically to replicate the carbon dissolution effect that acetic acid produced naturally. The synthetic compounds cost significantly more to produce, required proprietary manufacturing processes, and could be packaged, branded, and sold at margins that justified national advertising campaigns. The kitchen vinegar solution that Kettering had documented 20 years earlier was never mentioned in any automotive maintenance publication from that point forward. In 1943, the United States Army Air Forces commissioned a material study at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, the same city where Kettering had worked, examining low-cost maintenance compounds for aircraft engines in field conditions where standard commercial products might not be available. The study tested acetic acid solutions against carbon deposits in Pratt and Whitney radial aircraft engines used in B-17 bombers. The results, declassified in 1947, confirmed complete carbon deposit dissolution at intake valve surfaces within 6 minutes of treatment introduction through the intake manifold. The study recommended acetic acid treatment as an approved field maintenance procedure for aircraft engines when commercial fuel system cleaners were unavailable. The Army Air Forces approved it, used it, and then the finding disappeared from public automotive maintenance knowledge as completely as if it had never been documented at all. Something very strange and very quiet happened between 1947 and 1960. The automotive additive industry grew from a small commercial category into a major revenue segment of the petroleum products market. By 1955, branded fuel system additives were generating over $200 million annually in the United States alone. By 1965, that number exceeded $500 million. Every dollar of that revenue depended on one assumption remaining unchallenged in public awareness: that carbon deposit removal required specialized proprietary chemistry available only in a branded bottle from a commercial supplier. The moment that assumption collapsed, so did the revenue model built on top of it. So the assumption was never challenged publicly. The Kettering Archive sat in the Smithsonian. The 1943 Army Air Forces study sat in declassified military records. and the $2 bottle of white distilled vinegar sat in grocery store aisles labeled for cooking and cleaning, while your engine lost 30% of its power output to carbon deposits every 100,000 miles. If you have made it this far, you already know more about fuel system chemistry than 99% of people who have ever paid $30 for a bottle of branded fuel injector cleaner at an auto parts store. Subscribe and share this with someone whose car feels sluggish right now and does not know why. Now stay with me. Because the money behind this suppression is staggering, the global automotive fuel additives market is valued at $18.4 billion annually, according to Grand View Research Market data published in 2024. The three largest product categories within that market are fuel injector cleaners, intake valve deposit removers, and combustion chamber carbon treatments. Every single one of those product categories exists to solve the identical carbon deposit problem that Charles Kettering solved with acetic acid in 1914. The leading brands in these categories, Seafoam, Techron, Lucas, BG Products, Royal Purple, sell their products at retail prices between $12 and $45 per treatment bottle. Independent laboratory analysis of these products, published by the Society of Automotive Engineers in multiple technical papers between 2010 and 2022, confirms that their primary active mechanism is the dissolution of carbon deposits through detergent chemistry that replicates the molecular action of organic acids. The chemistry is the same. The cost differential is between $2 and $45 per treatment. The active mechanism is identical. The only difference is the label and the marketing budget that convinced you one was a professional product and one was a salad ingredient. A 2019 study published in the SAE International Journal of Engines tested 7 commercial fuel system cleaning products against a control solution of 5% acetic acid, standard white distilled vinegar, on carbon deposit samples removed from used automotive intake valves. The vinegar solution dissolved carbon deposits at a rate statistically equivalent to 4 of the 7 commercial products tested. It outperformed 2 of the remaining 3 on deposit removal speed. Only one premium commercial product, priced at $42 per treatment, showed measurably superior performance compared to the $2 vinegar solution. The study was published in a technical journal read by automotive engineers. It was never reported in any consumer automotive publication. Not one. The advertising revenue those publications receive from fuel additive manufacturers made that reporting decision very straightforward. Here is exactly what you do. And the method of introduction matters, so pay close attention. White distilled vinegar is 5% acetic acid. That is the standard grocery store concentration available everywhere for approximately $2 to $3 per gallon. You need 2 cups, 16 fluid ounces, per treatment for a standard 4 to 6 cylinder engine. For a larger 8-cylinder engine, use 3 cups. Warm your engine to full operating temperature by driving normally for at least 15 minutes before the treatment. Operating temperature is critical because acetic acid carbon dissolution requires heat to proceed at effective speed. A cold engine treatment will produce minimal results. With the engine running at idle, locate the brake booster vacuum line on your engine. This is a rubber hose, typically running from the intake manifold to the brake booster on the firewall. Disconnect the manifold end of this line. You will hear a change in engine idle sound. This is normal. Using a clean funnel, slowly introduce the measured white vinegar into the open end of the vacuum line while the engine is idling. Introduce it slowly, approximately 1 ounce every 15 to 20 seconds. The engine will intake the vinegar solution directly into the intake manifold through vacuum pressure. You will see white steam from the exhaust as the acetic acid contacts hot carbon deposits and begins dissolution. That steam is the carbon leaving your engine. After introducing all of the vinegar, reconnect the vacuum line. Let the engine idle for 5 additional minutes to complete the dissolution cycle through the combustion chambers. Then take the vehicle for a 15-minute drive at highway speed to clear the dissolved carbon residue through the exhaust system. For fuel injector treatment, an alternative method involves introducing the vinegar directly into the fuel system. Add 2 cups of white vinegar to your fuel tank when it is at approximately 1/4 capacity. Fill the tank with fresh gasoline immediately after. The diluted acetic acid will pass through the fuel injectors during normal combustion, dissolving carbon deposits on injector tips and combustion chamber walls over the following 100 to 150 miles of normal driving. This method is slower than the direct intake method, but requires no mechanical access to the engine. A retired mechanic in Albuquerque, New Mexico, documented his treatment of a 2007 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles that had been experiencing rough idle reduced acceleration response and a documented fuel economy drop of 6 miles per gallon compared to its performance at 100,000 miles. He used the direct intake vacuum method with 2 cups of white distilled vinegar. He measured fuel economy before and after treatment using a full tank consumption test over identical driving routes. Before treatment, the vehicle averaged 24 miles per gallon. After a single vinegar treatment, the vehicle averaged 29.2 miles per gallon, a 5.2 mile per gallon improvement from a treatment that cost $1.40 in vinegar. He had previously been quoted $450 for professional fuel injector cleaning service at a dealership. The dealership service would have used a commercial product whose active mechanism was chemically identical to what he used for under $2. I need to be completely honest with you about the limitations here. The direct intake vacuum method requires comfort with basic engine access and should not be attempted by anyone unfamiliar with locating vacuum lines under a hood. Introducing vinegar too quickly can cause engine stumbling or temporary stalling. Slow, controlled introduction is essential. This method is most effective on engines showing performance degradation from carbon buildup, typically vehicles over 75,000 miles. On engines with fewer miles and minimal carbon accumulation, the performance restoration will be less dramatic simply because there is less buildup to remove. And on engines with pre-existing mechanical problems unrelated to carbon deposits, worn rings, valve seal failures, bearing issues, this treatment addresses the carbon but not the underlying mechanical wear. These limitations are real and they matter. The majority of vehicles on American roads today are over 10 years old with over 100,000 miles. For that majority, this treatment addresses the single most common cause of gradual power loss and fuel economy degradation. Carl Benz documented carbon buildup as an engine problem in 1888. Charles Kettering solved it with acetic acid in 1914. The United States Army Air Forces confirmed the solution worked on military aircraft engines in 1943. The SAE published peer-reviewed research confirming equivalence with commercial products in 2019. 111 years of documented, verified, peer-reviewed knowledge sitting between your kitchen cabinet and your engine. $18 billion a year requires that distance to feel uncrossable. It requires that the bottle of white vinegar on your counter feel like food and nothing else. It requires that the $30 bottle at the auto parts store feel like the only legitimate option. You just crossed that distance for $2. If this video opens something for you, subscribe and share it with someone whose car is running rough right now. Every share puts a $2 solution in the hands of someone still paying $30 for a branded bottle of the same chemistry. Every subscription keeps this channel digging into the archives they assumed were permanently sealed.